We start with a young interracial couple called Alan and Belinda, celebrating Belinda's birthday on a small bench. As turns out, he's gone and purchased a star for her and even got the certificate with her name on to prove it. And I can totally relate, because I'm still haunted by the fact that somewhere in the galaxy, a star is officially named after a fungal infection, given my so-called best mate thought it'd be hilarious to immortalise me as Captain Knobcheese of Sector 7 for my birthday.
Fuck you!
Anyway, after the most awkward kiss since Adrian Brody straight up forced himself on Halle Berry at the Oscars back in the day, and also Senator Hawley that one time, we cut to 17 years later, as we soon catch up with Nurse Belinda, now all grown up. Whilst also reuniting with the First Black Crybaby Doctor, fresh from dumping that ex-soap opera girl and fighting off that Egyptian space dog from last season. And turns out he's desperate to find this spicy nursey bird, but totally keeps missing her like a riot wally. As indeed so desperate to find her, he accidentally causes a major power outage in a local Hozzy, and straight up laughs it off as an oopsie, despite almost certainly flatlining half the geriatric ward. Like, babies in incubators? Gone. Old man mid-transplant? Lol, guess he's speedrunning the afterlife now.
Sucks to be you.
Anyway, later that night, her gaff is invaded by robot space aliens with a fellow addiction to Greg's sausage rolls, who promptly hold up that star certificate she got back in the day and tell her that she's totally their queen for some reason, before she's kidnapped and trafficked across the frigging galaxy in front of her bewildered neighbour. You know, the meta fourth wall breaking one who goes by the name of Mrs. Flood and kept popping up everywhere in season 1/14 because she's part of the series long mystery arc or some shit. As the dopey doc goes and bloody misses her yet again.
Go!
After the opening titles, featuring two beautifully British names no fucker can pronounce, and don't you dare mention the words great and replacement, the doc chases after the ship, as Belinda shamelessly tries to save herself by telling him it was her awkward controlling boyfriend that bought her that certificate and that named a star after her, so go and bloody kidnap him already. Naturally, they don't want no stinking incelly Alan fella, so just carry on trafficking her to God knows where. And after going through some kind of time fracture, what makes her ramble incoherently and spaz out worse than a certain ex-president trying to read a bloody autocue,
True international effort to pressure.
they finally land on the planet of Belinda Chandraville and meet yet another ethnic bird called Sasha 55, who says everything here is named after this random nurse because reasons, and that they're all totally ruled over by them fat-ass botty boys. Once inside, and almost stepping on some random polishing droid, they promptly set about sorting out this brown-skinned Indian bird with an arranged marriage. And before you can say, poor girl can't escape her own culture even on another fucking planet, they want her to marry the great AI generator so they can totally meld together to go and create the ultimate cyber union. Or some shit. Naturally, she's not really up for enforced cybernetic wedlock and tries to get the heck out of Dodge. But after telling her to shut up and stay put, they bring in an ethnic minority historian guy, who turns out to be the undercover First Black Doctor what can't stop blubbering. But instead of saving her, he just proceeds to bang on about the history of the robot revolution 10 years ago, whilst also randomly inserting strange words every now and again, like he's having a bunch of microstrokes or something. Because rather cunningly, he secretly reveals that the robots can't understand the ninth word in a sentence because reasons, so promptly exploits this weakness to totally send her a coded message without being caught, exposed and removed. And before you can say, well, that's kind of how we have to talk on any public internet platform these days, and my ninth words are usually either vaccine, gender, woke, climate, election, border, Trump, freedom or Nick, they go and spring a surprise revolution of their own. And after that, Sasha Bird hilariously tells the doc to take Belinda home and totally come back to take her to the stars, well apparently after they spent 6 months growing close, and he then says sure it's totally a date, she covers them as they totally make a run for it. But in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, turns out the random nobody, what we just met, but have just enough context to know a potential demise will be emotionally affecting for the main character, and who himself just tempted fate by making a date with the woman who we know ain't the main character, nor even the season-long companion, proceeds to get herself totally deaded.
No way!
Naturally, the first black emotionally incontinent crybaby doctor takes a moment to have a little cry over his mate of 6 months getting zapped into dust by portly droids, before then properly introducing himself to her as the doc, as she just shrugs and gets busy nursing some local invalids, whilst proceeding to prove himself to be a BBC man through and through by exposing himself to a young lady and showing off his organs. And before she can say, you know, if you lower that x-ray blanket and show me got 2 of something else, I might just consider staying on and travelling with you for a full season, she goes and wonders why this entire planet literally revolves around her.
That's a great question. I've been wondering that myself.
So so the doc gets busy investigating, and soon reveals some timey-wimey BS about how he was totally stalking her that night she got taken, and was even in her garden just seconds after she left. And before you can say, well, being stalked by an illegal ethnic minority and hearing they were in your garden in the middle of the night just sounds like a typical Tuesday evening in London, he explains all about the time fracture they passed through earlier and how everything's now out of sync. And even though she left Earth on May 24th, 2025, the doc landed 6 months earlier than her despite leaving later, and then totally had his spaceship nicked, and has just spent the last 6 months hanging out with the now dusty Sasha girl in the underworld ever since. Turns out some of them dopey fat boys also accidentally landed on the planet 5,000 years before their colleagues who were transporting Belinda, so her certificate with her name on what they stole from her bedroom somehow became their society's foundation myth. Or some shit. Anyway, after telling her how they might be able to defeat the homicidal AI chatbot, well, if they can somehow merge two artifacts from the differing timelines, said robot fat boys totally find them. And so she promptly sacrifices herself to save the other rebels and stuff. Once back upstairs, the AI generator guy tries to convince her to do that conversion thing with him to achieve serenity. But she just can't believe it when he turns out to be her old pussy old boyfriend Alan from 17 years ago, and has now gone full chrome tard Cylon because reasons. Because turns out the droids really did go and get Alan after she shamelessly tried to save herself from her own kidnapping at one time, but just ended up arriving earlier by 10 years because of that pesky friggin' time fracture thing again. Gah! Somebody's got to do something about that bloody thing before we somehow end up with another 4 years of bloody Bojo again.
Hands up anybody's been to Peppa Pig World. Not enough. Peppa Pig World is very much my kind of place. It's
Fucking unreal.
Anyway, turns out he was the one what inspired the robot uprising in the first place, and then soon merged with the AI technology. Mainly because he was an inexperienced loser incel, and the titillating tech totally tickled his tickly bits. Oh, some shit. And the Doctor finally realises why these plums can't understand the ninth word in a sentence, giving some timey-wimey science bollocks about his brain interfacing with a machine on an 8-part loop.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I'm a little lost, but fair enough.
And after this budget Cyberman and coercive controlling simp gimp demands she submit herself to him as her Chad overlord and indeed supreme gentleman, the Doc lures over the polish bot, where he's gone and hidden the original version of the certificate. And once she goes and grabs it and touches it on his parallel version, time soon goes kablooey, giving the paradox makes reality's brain explode, and she starts seeing everyone as coffin dodgers and wrinkly old-timers.
Okay.
Luckily, the Doc absorbs most of the chronoblast and just laughs about how poor Alan has now been reduced to a sperm and egg, and who then suffers an even greater indignity of getting casually polished up by the polishing bot.
Nice.
After the danger is finally over, they say their goodbyes to leave, as a young girl is introduced to this strange man's vehicle and then told to shut up and get in his weird space van already. Which she totally does, and just like my arse after a rather thorough airport inspection by the TSA, she realises it's now bigger on the inside. The Doc then tells her that they're totally connected too, given he once met her descendant in the 51st century during the episode last season, when he kept running off without looking where he was going, stepping on landmines and crying his eyes out for 45 minutes straight. But she don't really give a stuff, and don't want to go travelling in some space hobo's magic van, and instead just wants to go home already, given she was almost made into a stunning and brave queen of an entire planet, and also came within inches of being made into a super smart being of unlimited power and potential. 'Cause that's like super dangerous, bro. And besides, I just want to put my feet up and watch Countdown already. But unfortunately, he can't land the TARDIS for love nor money, given they keep bouncing off May 24, 2025, like hyper kids bounce around the theatre during a Minecraft movie screening.
What the fuck?
And before you can say, well, too bad you don't have a time machine and can't just go back to the day before whatever caused this utterly mental shit, the Doc heads on out to figure what the fuck is going on already, before realising Earth is totally gone, and there's only remnants of conveniently recognisable landmarks left drifting about. So I guess she's got no choice but to stick around for a few more epis, and according to IMDb, probably about 7 more at least. And that's it. That's episode 1 of season 2/15. Though my favourite part, well, aside from RTD the retarded literally having a character say the line,
Planet of the Incels.
despite it just being a planet with one single incel on it, so it doesn't even really make sense grammatically or narratively, was the bit where stunning and brave new companion Belinda Chandra has the sheer gall to say,
What, happy watching? Some things don't change. There's always a doctor standing back while the nurses do all the hard work.
well, guess she's never worked in the NHS then.
You got a big booty, big, big booty. What you got a big booty. Together, once we know that we are, we're all stars and we see that it's gonna be love.
No!
But anyway, on to episode 2. We start with a bunch of ye olde cinema goers, including a specky four-eyed soy boy, getting roasted by a literal fourth wall breaking sarcastic cartoon bloke and promptly getting gobbled up.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear.
After the opening titles, the Doctor dodges painful questions about his home planet and his potentially possibly dead yet sort of resurrected and yet possibly maybe dead again race of Time Lordy relatives and general lore what even I can't keep up with, whilst attempting to build some sort of contraption to try and get his new exotic floozy back home already, despite Earth having been destroyed on the day she left on May 24th, 2025. But first have to land in a random spot to totally charge up the device. And before you can say, okay, but I still don't get why they can't just visit Earth the day before it explodes, well given they've got and indeed are standing about in a literal time machine for fuck's sake, we cut to our stunningly diverse lead heroes chilling out in 1950s Miami. And just weighing up whether to worry about Jim Crow or Ronnie DeSantis, the Doc gets distracted from his device thing by noticing a chain on the local cinema door. And the pair then find a closure notice and letters of condolences, given a bunch of people apparently died inside. And I can totally relate, because I totally died inside at the cinema too, when I went to see one of my favourite video games finally adapted for the screen, but instead just had to sit through 2 hours of Kevin Hart trying to play tough guy, and old and busted Kate Blanchett carrying the entire movie on her back, and bloody Jack Black channeling the feelings of the audience by constantly wishing that everyone in this film would just hurry up and die already.
Sounds about right.
Anyway, even though his BS MacGuffin gadget thing is now ready and they can totally go back home and end all our misery by ending the season right here, right fucking now, the curiosity totally gets to the cheeky chappy chocolatey Time Lord who just can't resist investigating the gaff. So after whining about and then totally ignoring the current local customs of racial segregation, they then talk to some locals in a diner and find out how that specky four-eyed soy boy was in fact the missing son of a poor woman, who still sits outside looking at the local cinema at 4 in the friggin' morning, because she just can't get over losing her only incel kiddie with the dodgy eyesight and stuff. So the Doc promptly promises her to bring him home, and presumably also get him some LASIK vouchers and a gym membership or some shit. After being told the old projectionist is still locked up in there, given he was initially a suspect but was released on a lack of evidence and so now just lives in there like a hermit caretaker because reasons, they sneak in the back door and finally meet that all singing all dancing sarky carty fella, whose name is Mr. Ring-a-Ding apparently. The Doc then studies this guy who's made of and indeed feeds on light, and soon realises he's a bit of a Harry Sisson type, well given he's totally two-dimensional and void of literally any substance.
Bruh.
But despite being trapped inside this place due to some BS about Moonlight or some shit, he says he don't know what happened to them audience members who just wanted a peaceful day out of the movies but instead just got terrorised by 3-foot monsters. Which just sounds like my horrific experience when I took my nephew to see the Super Mario movie last year.
Oh, good lord!
But anyway, things soon get proper dark after the Doc asks him his true identity and then a bunch of letters fall off the outside sign, soon revealing him to be one of them Harbinger fellas, much like the ones the Doc faced off against in previous epis, like the Neil Patrick Harris toy making fella, the CGI Egyptian doggy death god, and the properly nightmarish drag queen musical monster clown.
What the hell is even that?
Turns out his name is Lux Imperator, the god of light, and he's totally going to gobble them up too. But luckily, his favourite song starts playing, what he has no choice but to dance to because reasons. Kinda like White Guys when Mr. Brightside or the Macarena comes on over the radio. Anyway, once inside the projector room and finally meeting Mr. Reggie Pye, the hermit caretaker guy, and yes that is his real name, he says that the song keeps a baddie distracted for 1 minute and 36 seconds, and probably uses that time to tell him all about how he got into this predicament and why he spends his nights locked up in a small room talking to small cartoon men. Because turns out this God of Light fella keeps showing him realistic visions and projections of his deaded wife, and so thus presumably just spends all night wanking himself into an early grave over an early version of his wife's OnlyFans or some shit.
Mitch.
Anyway, after realising the missing peeps are actually frozen and immortalised inside some film stock, Luxy Boy soon catches up to him and does something similar to them, promptly turning them into shallow and flat two-dimensional versions of themselves. And before you can say, so absolutely nothing at all has changed then, they find themselves transformed into animated shallow and flat two-dimensional versions of themselves.
Weird.
And after they realise they can move up dimensional perspectives by just being honest and telling super sad truths, he reveals how all his friends, family and culture are practically extinct and his home is totally in ruins. And before you can say, well, as an Englishman in current day London, I'm kind of in the same boat, pal, they manage to break out of the shallow two dimensions and return to their natural shallow selves, but now in all three dimensions. Huzzah! The show then goes full meta by literally breaking the fourth wall, as our heroes then crawl into the homes of some superfans who finally get to meet their heroes too. And soon explain how they're actually both characters on a once beloved TV show, but has now been ruined by relentless hardcore identity politics and taken over by a super lefty homosexual and who can't bloody stop himself injecting gay race communism into the show. And neither can it now even crack 3 million in the ratings.
Oh, that's gotta hurt!
And the dog just can't believe all his adventures were essentially phony fakey fanfic and his every move has been watched for over 60 years. Even that time when he was alone in his TARDIS and did unspeakable things with that sonic screwdriver.
Disgusting!
And also when he was alone with River Song in the TARDIS and did even more unspeakable things with his sonic screwdriver.
Disgusting!
And you don't even want to know about what poor Canine was subjected to during the private moments in the Tom Baker years.
Disgusting!
Anyway, the stunningly diverse and differently abled Whovian superfans then reveal that they ain't really real at all, and this has all been a totally pointless waste of screen time, given they'll all blink out of existence when they move on anyway. Which they totally seem to do, as the pair then realise that they can totally escape by stopping the frames in the celluloid and burning up the reel, which they also totally do. And after healing his burned up hand, with a bit of extra regen energy still stored up from the time he pulled out of another man's body but not in a fun way, and then spent the rest of his debut episode without trousers like a complete degenerate, Mr. Ring-a-Ding now totally sees him as a whole buffet of light, and promptly starts gobbling up his Time Lordy essence. And before you can say, now will probably be a good time for his useless companion to play that convenient distraction song, given it was introduced earlier but still yet to come up again, he looks like it's curtains for the First Black Crybaby Doctor, who I think has finally now had his first adventure without bursting into tears this week.
Finally!
But luckily, Belinda finally pulls her finger out and convinces that Reggie Pie hermit simp guy to stop living in a fantasy world where his deceased wife finally likes him again, and to nut up and pretend that all the reels are made by Elon Musk and burn the whole fucking gaff down already. Which he totally does, thereby blowing a hole in the wall and freeing the once trapped god of light to go feed on the purest form of light there is. And no, not Gina Carano. As he then gorges himself on the fucking sun, and somehow ends up being defeated by eating too much and growing to the point of ever increasing infinite mass expansion. Much like my fat ass Uncle Dave did during the all you can eat bottomless bucket competition at KFC a few years ago. And before you can say, so they literally beat the malevolent god of light by setting him free to feed on an endless light source and thus becoming pure unstoppable infinite energy where he can now be everything everywhere and all at once? They laughably just call it a win and finally release the missing theatre goers. And thereby promptly keeping his promise to that miserable mopey mama and totally reuniting her with her specky four-eyed soy boy son. They then head off home, whilst that Miss Floodbird pops up yet again to cheekily tease a bunch of nobodies about some current day apocalyptic warning, and what's something that means absolutely nothing to these 1950s era American dopes. And that's it, that's the epi. Though my favourite part was the bit where the superfans insist that Season 3's Blink is totally their favourite instalment, and where the Doctor just can't believe how nobody seemed to like his first season of classic sci-fi adventures. Even the eps where he snogged a bloke in front of a bunch of owls, danced the night away in some sort of gay bar in a literal skirt, or even spent 45 minutes prancing about with a drag queen.
I don't get it. I still don't get it.
I also like the fact that they seem to have survived in a Marvel-style post-credit sequence, because now the writers can continue to use them as a meta-commentary on the state of the fanbase, like when they mocked the hashtag RIP Doctor Who bit in this epi, and also continue to ridicule and scorn the fans' complaints about the current state of the show and its problems, rather than doing a single damn thing about it. But anyway, that's a plot and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss the roast of episodes 3 and 4 when they drop. Tell me if you like this show in the comments if you have time. And I'll break the fourth wall and slag off my receding fanbase, including the loser incel likes of Yo-Yo Joey D _3636, Tinfoil Mad Hatter, Wolfbane7497 and Alex Neff with you, in the next one.